Advanced due diligence. In this video series, I'm going to be talking about due diligence and taking this subject into a more minute conversation. We're going to really kind of break down due diligence. I'm going to show you when it gets started, how to do it, what things to do, what things you're looking for, what kind of information do we need, and who does what in the due diligence process. All right, so it's going to be advanced due diligence. Now, what I do is I break down the concept of due diligence in general into two subtopics. And we're going to talk about physical due diligence and financial due diligence. Both are kind of separate. Both do fall into the due diligence category, but we're going to do them differently. Now, keep in mind that due diligence is the time frame that you begin with in a purchase and sale agreement. So the process, just as a recap, would go, I've looked at the property, maybe I've made an offer on that property using the letter of intent, I've submitted an LOI, they've accepted it. Okay, now we've negotiated the contract, the seller and I have executed the purchase and sale agreement, the PSA. All right, we are now under contract. The day we go under contract is called the effective date, right? That's the date that we all execute and it starts the clock going forward. Normally speaking, in almost all deals, the due diligence starts the same day as the effective date, normally. And so you're gonna have on average about 30 days to do your due diligence. This depends on the size of the property, depends on what you're looking at. If you're doing something like a house or a duplex, you might not have 30 days, maybe have a week or two. If you're doing larger commercial properties, multifamily, you're gonna want a minimum of 30 days, which is also pretty standard for the industry. If you're trying to get more than 30 days due diligence, that is in your favor, but that's getting a bit lengthy and that may make the offer not as attractive. If you want to get more aggressive, you could maybe even make the offer for 21-day due diligence. That's getting a bit risky there because you're cutting your time and that might increase your probability of a mistake, right? But those are just things that we can do to make offers more attractive without necessarily increasing the price. Decrease the due diligence period, and the second thing we can do is to put earnest money, non-refundable, sooner in the contract process. Normally, your earnest money will be refundable during the due diligence period. But once you come out of the due diligence period and your money goes hard, as we say, then the earnest money becomes non-refundable at that point, unless you've put in some other clauses such as financial contingencies, things of that nature. We'll discuss that in another video. But that's kind of the due diligence process. Starts at the effective date. Usually runs about 21 to 30 days. You're gonna have the ability to go in and do your physical and financial inspections of the property. The idea is that we're trying to make sure that the property is what the seller, is what the realtor has told us it was. Make sure that the property physically is what we thought, and make sure that the financials are what we thought. This would be in the category of making sure that the seller is not faking the books, they're not fraudulently creating a profit and loss, something of that nature. So we're gonna do the financial due diligence to make sure all of this stuff is true, accurate, and correct, and that we are safe in buying the property. So that's what due diligence is for, and that's what it is, and that's when we do it. Okay, so now let's start off talking about physical due diligence. Physical due diligence is going to be start off with the property, okay? So what we're gonna do on the physical side is step number one, you are gonna go and walk all of the units, okay? Every single unit. This is called the walk, the inspection. So I recommend that you, the buyer, yourself go in every single unit. So we're gonna say every unit. Now, are you gonna get a inspector to come with you? Are you going to hire an inspector to come out and do your physical due diligence for you? You may want to do that. I recommend that, especially if you're new to the business, that you hire a property inspector. And the property inspector must go in every single unit. This is very, very important. Don't let the property management company or the seller or someone else say, oh, you know, the little old lady that lives here changed the locks and we can't get in that unit. Or, oh, they've got a big dog and we really can't go in that apartment. Or, you know, I don't know. I've heard just about every excuse in the world. And it's always that unit that's the one that's damaged, the one that has mold, the one that may have been involved in a fire. You know, there's damage in there. It's always going to be that unit, right? So if for some reason you are there to do your property inspection and you're going to go and walk every single apartment, then you want to make sure that you let everybody know you're coming and that they can get you in there. If for some reason you cannot get in one of those apartments, you give them a 24-hour notice and you come back and you inspect that apartment 24 hours later. If for some reason you cannot get in that apartment, I would threaten to cancel the contract. I would go back to the realtor, go back to the seller and say, hey, listen, if you can't give me access to this property as stated in the contract, then I'm going to back out of this contract. Never close a deal that you haven't walked every single unit. You'll regret it. All right, so that's kind of physical walkthrough. That's what we've done. We've gone and we walked the whole property. We're looking at the exterior. We're looking at any kind of deferred maintenance. Do we see things like wood rot? How do the roofs look? How is the landscaping? How is the parking lot? Does it look like they've been practicing testing hand grenades in the parking lot? You know, we might want to get that fixed. Do we see balconies? Do we see rot on stuff that might hurt someone? That's what we call life safety, all right? Life safety. So you're kind of looking around for any life safety issues, all right? And do we see anything, you know, that might hurt someone? Do we see water, you know, maybe some kind of electrical line near water, anything like that? That's just the kind of stuff we're looking to inspect. Again, if you don't have a property inspector do it, you're taking a lot more risks. So I definitely recommend paying someone. Probably going to be, I don't want to give a quote on what the prices would be that changes, but you're going to pay an inspector per the unit. So more units, obviously it's going to cost more to do that, but it's definitely worth it. If you're going to go out on the property yourself and you do not have a property inspector, something else you could do would be potentially get contractors to join you on the walk. So maybe bring an electrician, a plumber, different people that could help you inspect the property. And then what you would want to do is exchange the work that may arise from that property tour with those particular contractors. So if I'm going to bring a plumber, an electrician, you know, carpenter, people to kind of help me inspect the property, then I'm going to guarantee those contractors any future work on that property in exchange for their help up front. Management companies can be very good at doing property inspections as well. So you may want to talk to the management company that you plan on hiring. Perhaps they can perform a lot of these services for you. So those are all different things you want to kind of pay attention to when we're doing the physical due diligence. So that's walking the property, looking at the exterior, looking at the interior, going inside every unit. We're checking the systems. We're looking at the air conditioning unit. We're looking at the plumbing. We're looking at the electrical, the water heaters, the appliances, the lights, the paint, the carpet. You're looking at everything just to see what kind of condition is all of this in. Again, if you're new to the business and you don't really know physical plant at that level and you're not 100% sure what you're looking at, always get someone to come along with you and bring that inspector. It'll be worth it in the long run. This is not one of the areas you want to start getting cheap, right? Cheap is expensive. So I would really not recommend that you go super cheap on your physical due diligence. That might be a problem that keeps on giving well into the future. All right, so something else we're going to do on the physical due diligence. Now we've come in, we've walked all of our apartments, we've looked at all of it, everything looks good, fine. What we're going to do now is we're going to go and do the lease audit. All right, lease audit is actually going to go on the physical side and not the financial side because it's actually done on the property and it's usually a function of the property. So what I'm saying by lease audit, what we're going to do is we're going to go into the office and we're going to go through all of the leases, or depending on how many units there are, maybe a sample of the leases. You're going to go through and you're going to start going through these leases and pull out the entire tenant file. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the rent roll and we're going to take that tenant's file and we're going to compare the two, and we're going to make sure that this is a legitimate tenant, that the file and the application is complete, that everything's in there. All right, so that's called a lease audit. If it's a smaller property, I'm going to say under 50 units, I would probably just look at every single lease on that property. If you're over 50 units, maybe up to 100 units or more, what I usually do is start off with about a 20% sample. All right, so I'll take, we'll put lease audit here, lease audit. And I'm going to say, you know, maybe 20% of the leases, you want to kind of pull them, take a look at them. All right, and what we're going to do is we're going to sit down. And so, like I said, you're going to open the tenant file. What you're looking for, first off, is the tenant application. Look at the tenant's application. Did they qualify to live on this property? Or did the manager override the tenant qualifications to allow this person to live here, right? So if you ask the management, hey, what is your leasing criteria? And they say something like 3 times the monthly rent in income, no prior evictions, no felonies, and a credit score above, make up a number. And then you start going through these tenant applications and you say, well, gosh, this person was evicted 2 years ago. They must have made an exception for this person, and their credit score doesn't match and their income doesn't match. That's what we're looking for. We're just looking to make sure that all or the vast majority of our tenants actually qualify to live on that property. If you find that a lot of these tenants are living here and they really didn't pass this proper qualification, you're going to probably have occupancy issues in the near future within the first 90 days after you close the property. So that's what we're really looking for. We're looking to make sure that these are real tenants, making sure that they're actually living there, it's actually leased to someone that qualified to live there, and are they paying the rent? So that's kind of the lease audit. So again, you're going to open the file, you're going to start with that tenant application, make sure it's real, make sure their personal information is on there, make sure it's actually signed. Funny, that's a real thing. You must make sure that lease application is signed. All right, now we take a look at the rent roll and the lease. All right, because that is the legal document, the lease, not the rent roll. The lease is the legal document that's going to hold up if you ever have to go through an eviction or there's some kind of legal issue. It's always going to be the lease that the judge is going to fall back to. So we want to pull out the lease. Okay, let's look at the move-in date, the move-out date. Does that match the information on the rent roll? Does the lease amount actually show the same thing on the rent roll? I've seen this where sometimes people or managers will fake something on a rent roll to show the owner much higher numbers, but maybe they've got something different or something going on with the actual person living in the unit. We're looking for that. We're looking to see if there's any kind of theft or anything like that. So again, it's looking at that lease, making sure all the items match. Is it signed? Again, make sure it's actually properly signed, and we're checking that against the rent roll. And that's kind of a lease audit. It's not super detailed. It's not super complicated. You're just kind of using your common sense, and you're going through the file, and you're making sure that it's a real person and a real tenant, and they qualify to live there. And well, like I said, if you go through a larger property, 100 units or so, and you pull about 20%, and all 20% check out and everything looks clean, I usually just go ahead and move on. Like I said, if you're maybe 50 units and under, you probably just want to pull all of them. If I pull 20% and I start to find mistakes or errors or things that concern me, I'm going to pull another 20%. And if I find some more mistakes, some more errors, I'm pulling them all now, right? So I'm not going in there with the expectation of doing 100% lease audit. I'm going to do a sample, and I'm going to see what that sample pulls up. Any kind of issues, any idiosyncrasies, anything that's not right, you get a funny feeling at all, pull more and keep pulling until you get to all of them if that's what you have to do. This is your time, your due diligence. You're here to protect your money. You're here to protect your investors' money. You're here to protect the investment in general. So that's what due diligence is for. So don't waste your time. Don't skip over some of this stuff. Slow down and spend your time doing it right. Lease audit. So that's pretty much lease audit there. Again, nothing rocket science. We're going to do our physical walkthrough, walk all the units. Then we're going to go inside, do our lease audit, make sure all that's good. If all of that is good, then it's time to move on to the financial due diligence. Now, what I recommend is kind of doing your physical audit first, and even maybe walking the units prior to hiring inspectors, and certainly prior to actually making your loan application. I'm going to talk about the loan applications portion in a minute and what due diligence the lender is going to do. But before you apply with your lender, and the reason I'm saying before you apply with the lender is because once you apply with the lender, you're going to write a check. You're now spending money. So prior to spending money, and I'm talking about the day of contract execution, so from your effective date and before your loan application, try and get your physical due diligence done. Even if you're not sending out inspectors, even if it's just you physically walking the units and doing the lease audit, that's relatively inexpensive, and I recommend doing that first, fast, and right out of the gate, because you might be able to stop the deal, and you may kill the deal at this level. If you start finding a lot of units that are vacant or empty and the rent roll's not accurate and these people aren't living here, I've found that several times. Perhaps you find that the lease audit is off and the owner has leased up a bunch of these units just to show occupancy, things of that nature. You might decide to not go further with the property, and you want to do that before you make that loan application. Because once you make the loan application, that's not refundable money. And it would not be a good idea to go apply with the bank, write the loan application check, then just to come over here and find out that half the units are damaged or there's some kind of surprise. You could have figured that out fast, early, and long before you spent money. So that's why I kind of say in order: a letter of intent, purchase and sale agreement, effective date, physical due diligence, financial due diligence, apply for your bank loan, in that order. All right, so now let's talk about financial due diligence. What are we doing over here on the financial side? Pretty straightforward here. Just as it sounds, we're trying to make sure that the seller is not being fraudulent in their information they've given us. What information? The profit and loss, or the trailing 12. Whatever financial information you were given to analyze the deal, whatever financial information you were given that you based that offer on, is what you're going to now do the due diligence on. Okay, so for this conversation, I'm going to assume that's a trailing 12 or a T12, right? That's our month-to-month profit and loss format, and that's the revenue, the income, and the expenses of the property. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the T12 and I'm going to request in my due diligence, I'm going to request from the seller one bank statement for every month on this T12. All right, so there should be 12 months on the T12, 12 months on the 12 bank statements. And what I'm doing is I'm going to reconcile. Now, this is something that if you're pretty good with accounting and you're pretty good with math and you feel comfortable doing it, you might could do it yourself. Me, I'm not so good at accounting and I really don't care for math that much. So I always outsource this. I bring in a financial analyst, or I send it over to my accountant to do, and they just charge me for a few hours of accounting service, and it's really not that big of a deal. And I feel much more secure knowing that I had somebody a lot smarter than myself looking over the books. But what we're doing here is we're taking the T12, and you're going to look at each month, January, February, March, April, and you're going to look at the coinciding bank statement, and we're looking to see if the effective income. Now remember, back in the analysis, it's the income, and we had, if we're looking at accrual books, you're starting off with gross scheduled, and then you've got vacancy and all this kind of stuff. We're not worried about that. We're worried about the actual cash number, and that is called effective income. It's going to be right on that profit and loss on the T12. It's going to be right above the expenses. That's the last income number. And that's what we're looking at. We're looking at that and going to look at each month, look at the bank statement. Does the number match, or is it very close? If it is not close, then we have to go back to the seller and say, hey, why does your T12 say you put $100,000 a month in cash in the account? I'm looking over here and I see $60,000 a month. It's a major red flag here. And so that's what we're doing in our financial due diligence. Not very complicated. Again, you're just looking at the bank statements. You're going to reconcile that cash balance, making sure that the seller has put the revenue in that they said that they had. You're not really going to go through the expenses as much on the statement here, on the bank statement. You can if you go through all of them, if you get the actual general ledger from the property, you can go through every little expense. I tend not to do that. I'm more concerned with the revenue, because the revenue is what people fake. The expenses I can control once we close. Right? So once I own the property, the expenses I'm not as concerned about, but I am very concerned about the revenue. And so that's why we've got to make sure that the seller is not faking the revenue. And that's what our financial due diligence does for us. So that's kind of the financial to physical due diligence. Going through those is not rocket science. Again, it's not anything that's super complicated. Once you've done it once or twice, it really makes a lot of sense. Physical side, definitely hire yourself an inspector to go out and inspect your units. And then on the financial side, you might want to get a bookkeeper or an accountant or somebody to kind of help you reconcile those books. All right, so again, this is what we are going to do prior to making a loan application. All right, once we've made our loan application, or once we've done these two, physical and financial due diligence, then we make our loan application. That's where you go over to the bank and you say, okay, I'm ready to apply for the mortgage. You're going to put down money at that point in time. All right, it depends on the size of the property and the level of expenses that the bank is going to have to incur, or lender is going to have to incur. That dictates the amount of money that the loan application is. So I really can't tell you a rule of thumb for amounts for loan application. That changes and it depends on the lender. But what I can tell you is what they're going to do with the money. Okay, so when you go in and you apply for a loan with a bank or a Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, or a DUS lender, something of that nature, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to hire what we call your thirds, or your third-party reports, thirds for slang. And the third-party reports are going to be three different things that the lender is going to send out for. First is going to be an environmental inspection. All right, environmental inspection. Second report or second person that they're going to send out for is your appraisal or appraiser. So that's just going to be the appraiser. They're going to go out and just do a normal appraisal, right? We talked about this in the income, or excuse me, in the deal approach, in the analysis part, the different types of valuations that the appraiser is going to use. Remember, they're going to use the income approach, they're going to use the comparable sale approach, and they're going to use the replacement cost approach. All right, that's what the appraiser is going to do, and they're going to create the appraisal and the value for the bank. Pretty self-explanatory there. Oh yeah, again, the environmental inspection. This is going to be someone that comes out of a environmental engineer group company, and they're going to come out and do some soil samples. They're going to kind of take a look at the area, and what the environmental inspection is doing is to verify that there is not any sort of environmental or chemical hazards on this property before the bank comes in and gives you a loan. So that's what they're doing. So you can, as you're first looking at a property, some just quick things to look for. Do you see anything adjacent to the property that might cause chemical issues? Normally, those are things like laundromats, garages, gas stations, and even storage facilities. Those are things that environmental inspector is going to kind of pick up on if they're right close to your property, because all of those different structures can have chemicals and things leak from them onto your property. Storage facilities, you know, people hide stuff in there. People put chemical waste and things in there, and that's why those are one of the things that kind of tip them off. But if this passes and there's nothing wrong with your property, then they're gonna do a phase 1 environmental inspection. All right, a phase 1. That means they're just gonna come out and do the quick samples, take a look around, look at the adjacent buildings, everything looks okay, and it passes phase 1. They're gonna stop at that. If they find something, there's some kind of contamination in the ground or in the water, something like that, then they're going to do a phase 2 environmental inspection. That's not a good day. Let me just go ahead and tell you right there. If I have never triggered a phase 2 in all the properties I've owned, I've never had to do a phase 2. But if I did, I probably would be walking away from that property, because that would mean that they have found some kind of contamination that is of material concern, and that's not a good day. So that's your environmental inspection. Again, appraisal, just like a standard appraisal. They're going to go out and look around, figure out what the property's worth from those 3 different angles. Third report that we're going to get out here is what we call the physical needs inspection, or P&A, physical needs assessment. So P-N-A, the physical needs assessment. This is a report that is going to be created by a structural engineer. And that's the third person that's going to come out and inspect your property on behalf of the lender, a physical engineer. The physical engineer is going to go through the building, not every single unit and every single nook and cranny, but they're going to go through that property and they're going to assess the condition of the building. And that's where we get our physical needs. So they're going to write up this report that says this building is in this condition. We, as the engineer, recommend fixing this, 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 and this. And this creates your CapEx reserves. All right, CapEx. Okay, so our engineer comes out, does their inspection, creates the physical needs assessment document. The P&A is then turned over to the lender, and the lender then decides how much capital expense money you need to place into reserves with the lender at closing to come back over here and take care of some of the issues that they found in your P&A. So this is why I say it's kind of important to do your physical walk and to do some of those things prior to calling up your lender and spending this money, because you may find something down here that this same inspector is going to find, and you know they're going to find it, and maybe you decide not to do the deal before you waste this money. Because once you hire the bank and the bank hires these inspectors, if for some reason they come out and do these reports and the deal does not close, well, you're the happy new owner of 3 reports on a property you're not going to own. So what a waste. Who cares? You know what I'm saying? That's why you don't want to spend this money until you're relatively sure that property is going to go through. And again, that's why I say kind of run through your physical financial inspections pretty quickly before you go spending money and or wasting money. So that's your physical needs inspection. Goes over to CapEx, create your CapEx budget. So this is your third-party reports. And so this is what the bank is doing on their side of due diligence and what they're going to do with your money, your application money, there's a little bit more money they're going to spend, and that's actually probably on one of the lenders or someone from the lender's office physically coming down, showing up, putting boots on your property, and looking around. So the bank, the lender, will often actually show up. And so there's going to be a little bit of money in there that they spend on that and some admin fees. But that's pretty much what your application money goes to, and that's what we're doing in due diligence. So get all that done as best you can. Don't spend money when you don't have to. All right, so moving along, that's all I have for you here, and that's due diligence. So you got to get out there. You want to get on that early. Don't shortcut yourself. Don't cut the time frame too low. You can kind of see the different aspects that need to occur, and this is where I kind of say, maybe 21 days or something like that, especially on a larger property, probably going to be pretty tight time frame. If you lose a deal because you were not willing to do a really short due diligence window, that's okay. It's better that you walk away from a deal or walk away from a deal that you're not comfortable with than to get into a deal you don't understand because you were trying to go too quickly and you made mistakes and you got in there, you closed the deal, and then all of a sudden later on you found out there was something very wrong with the deal. So please don't do that. Do your due diligence and stay safe out there. We'll see you next time.